think we're live from the start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Classical Concerts from Quarantine. Now that Gabby has managed to stop dropping my phone, I hope that Instagram viewers are enjoying a smooth transmission. I'm joined by Andy and Robert for the first time. Robert moved in last Saturday, but like all diligent architectural town planners, he was called immediately into a team meeting. So it's very nice to have him here for the first time. He's wasted no time at all in getting in his request, which, assuming I can relearn it in time, we'll be hearing next week. It's been a better week, I think. I speak purely for my mood. I don't think it's been a better week in general in the country, unless you are an operator of Durham tourist hotspots, in which case I think you've had a great surge in interest. We've pottered along. Tiago's with us for his last week now. We will then lose a member of it's become a lovely little community here and go back to our normal six. But I have to say it's given us a real shot in the arm to have new lively blood in the household, thanks to Robert, and we look forward to great many high jinks in the future. Our swimming pool sounds grandiose, I know, but you can swim in it just about. Arrived yesterday, and that's given us, I think, a lovely bit of diverting, especially as the weather gets warmer. Maybe for the first time ever after today, I'll be able to enjoy a swim in a swimming pool, which I think is pretty much a first for me in terms of concerts. Music today, we're going right from Bach through to Liszt. This is the first Bach that we've had, which I think has kind of suited me in a way, because I've always found Bach to be one of the more demanding composers. He places such unbelievable requirements on you in terms of multitasking, in terms of your listening, in terms of your just general facets of coordination. And then, of course, with Bach there comes complexities relative to the fact that none of his works were composed for anything resembling this modern piano, other than they would have had 88 keys. Well, they wouldn't have had 88 keys. They would have just had some keys, and that's about the only similarity. This is a request from Fabio, who was until a couple of months ago living with us. He was, in our sort of direct circle of friends, probably the first coronavirus casualty. This was at a time when we were really pretty blasé about the whole situation, and we were relaxing, going about life as normal, witnessing politicians boasting about shaking hands. And it was Fabio, the canary in the coal mine, really, who, because of his Italian background and the fact that his mother was still in Italy, was going around the house warning us of what was to come and of the severity of the situation. The situation eventually got too much for him, and he decided to move up to Darlington to be with his brother, and so he is no longer with us. Fabio, I gather you're doing much better, and we send you all our very best from here. Fabio requested, he was nice actually, he was kind to me, he requested anything from Bach's Sixth Partita, which gave me some scope, given that Bach's Sixth Partita, it's almost a tongue twister, given that Bach's Sixth Partita was in no way a mainstay of my repertoire. So I've picked what I think is the most beautiful, touching dance movement from that suite, the Sarabande. So Bach's partitas were composed in the 1720s, and then this one in 1730. By this time of the sixth one, which is his last partita, he was very much at the height of his powers. He composed over 800 other compositions, and it was these partitas that kind of put him unchallenged on the map as a virtuoso, which is something that he was looking to change in his career path at around this time. He was slightly tired with the job that he had been doing up until now. There was nothing that was being written as complex, as demanding, as far-reaching, as extraordinary as these works, and they really kind of solidified his place at the top of the tree. It's so interesting that he'd composed 800 compositions, and they're all catalogued under the BWV series, but actually the partitas, when they were published as a set, became his opus 1, because he'd composed so many compositions, but none of them had been officially published. And this was the start of a growing trend of composers actually formally publishing their compositions. Partita was just his way of, his equivalent of the French suite, the word suite meaning a collection of dances. He'd already composed French suites and English suites, which were much smaller in scale, and now I think he wanted a change of tack. He wanted to move to a more Italianate style and language, which is why he chose the word partita. And these are a collection, as I say, of dances, allemands, bourrées, courantes, and sarabandes, as I'm going to play for you now, which is a slow dance, something of a sitting, quite sedentary, held-back dance. And in his hands, in Bach's hands, in this work, becomes a work of intense profundity and thought. I think one of the most remarkable things about here, I would show you the score if I could easily. Maybe I can easily. Oh, hey, there we go. It looks quite complex. You know, there's lots of black, there's lots of figuration. It doesn't look like something that's free and casual and improvised. And I think that's one of the most cool paradoxes in classical music, is that in order to achieve the feeling of something that is totally without limitations and borders, and is improvised, composers had to write so much detail because it's such a complex form of notation. Anyway, I hope that feeling will come across to you. Beautiful piece, Fabio. We wish you all the best, and we send you all our love. One more thing, all these dances are in binary form in 2 parts. So we've got a shorter section and then a longer section, each of which will be repeated, and the longer section is going to take a more developmental attitude to the material that we've heard in the first section. Fabio was quite a handy pianist in his spare time, and he used to often serenade us. Our bedroom is just the room above here, and we used to often wake up in the morning to the sounds of his Chopin or his Mozart or his Bach. I don't know, we seemed similar temperamentally in that we both are quite drawn to rather melancholic music, and so I thought it was fitting to play something a little bit melancholic for him now. I hope you enjoyed that, mates. Okay, we're going to move forward pretty much 100 years. Chopin wrote his Preludes in 1838 when he was 28 years old, and was similarly absolutely on his game in the same way as Bach was. I think utterly coincidentally, it's rather cool that these two works have ended up going side by side, because in Chopin's 24 Preludes he seeks to cover every one of the 12 major and 12 minor keys on the piano, thus making 24 Preludes. And I would say that this set of Preludes is the only set really that deals with the key structure in this way, that measures up to the sorts of things Bach was doing with his Well-Tempered Clavier, his 48 Preludes and Fugues, which were 2 books, one each, covering all of the major and minor keys. So it's rather nice that these two works have somehow fallen side by side. Chopin is a composer who is much loved, I think, based on the evidence of the requests we've had for these concerts. Probably the most popular so far. I believe we've had Chopin every week, apart from 1 week when I decided to co-opt the scheduling for my own ends. One can easily see why so much of his music is so readily accessible, both from a pure oral point of view and from an emotional attachment point of view. I certainly feel when I sit down to learn a new piece of Chopin as if more often than not I can hold the key to the general emotional roadmap of the work from quite an early stage. His Preludes, on the other hand, I think are a little bit more, I don't want to say obscure, but definitely abstract. Many commentators have noted them for their somewhat increased level of poetry, and in fact I think it was Liszt who said that these were akin to a contemporary poet in terms of the ideas and the structures and the very fleeting glimpses of suggestions, which is all we get here. I mean, it's a fascinating idea to compose a set of preludes, because a prelude, one would think, wouldn't exist without the thing that it was a prelude to. But precisely in so doing, Chopin creates these introductions to nothing. These tiny little pieces, so there's 24 of them, many of them are about a minute long. I'm not playing 24 today, it's all good. Many of them are very, very short, and so in them he is seeking really just to capture the essential characteristics, the essential styles of a piece that is yet to come, that has never been written, that will never be written, and we are therefore left to fill in the details of that bigger picture in our head, which I think is just very cool, very interesting as a concept. I think I'm playing 6 today. I'll remember how many as we go along. They are for a variety of different people. It was Ian who sent me down the Preludes track many weeks ago, and I apologise, Ian, for taking so long with this, but as I say, they're not, some of them I found just very interesting musically, and I wanted to spend enough time on them to feel like I knew my way around them a little bit better. So Ian kicked us off with a recommendation for a few of them, and then Naomi was very keen to hear one of them, which I'll talk about in a second, and then Harry requested another last weekend. So we have a real conglomerate of dedicatees for this next set. I might just talk to you a little bit about each one. The first one that I'm going to play is number 6. Is it? Or is it number 7? Number 7. And it's only 2 lines long. And this is a classic prelude that students often learn. People often learn when they're of a more kind of intermediate level at the piano, because it's not very complicated. On one level, it's disarmingly simple getting your hands around the pure notes. But on another level, because it's so short and because every single little phrase seems like a question, it's got this incredibly intangible and hard to put one's finger on kind of vibe to it. So I find it an incredibly incredible piece. That was superb language. I find it an incredibly interesting piece. It's about 40 seconds long. After that, we are going to come to number 9. This is a slow one. Tell you what, I might perform 2 at a time. So I have a little chat and then a little play. Number 9 is a slow one. It's broad, it's vast, it's rather extraordinary harmonically. He asks quite annoying things of one technically, because he writes big chords in the right hand, normally 3 or 4 notes at a time, and at the top of those chords you need to bring out a melody. And so it's rather difficult, given that the hand ideally wants to play all the notes at the same volume, to achieve that. In order to unlock that kind of technical demand, we need to deploy seemingly the most innocuous part of our fingers, but actually as a pianist the most powerful, and that's the top joint, the one closest to the fingertip. If we can train those to be very, very strong and move very, very quickly, and train them to be independent of each other, that is how we can activate top or bottom or middle voices without having to descend from a great height and without having to have too much tension further up the arm or the wrist. So he throws in that curveball there. It's an incredible piece. It just sort of builds and stretches and grows through key to key. And there's an amazing moment on the 4th line where we reach this kind of peak, the crest of the wave, and he brings us into a harmony we really weren't expecting. Absolutely glorious moment about halfway through. We've started in E major, and that was an A flat major chord, which is, given that E major has 4 sharps and A flat 4 flats, it's a fairly significant departure, and that's why this absolutely glorious radiance erupts and feels so freeing and alien to what's come before. So I'm going to whip you those first 2 out now, and then we'll crack on with the next 2. The other reason I thought it actually would be quite cool to split them up into twos is because it works better harmonically. Those two were in very similar keys, and then the next two are in very unrelated keys, but the next two's keys are very similar to each other's. So we're now going to do the most famous one, probably, of all the preludes. This was given the name Raindrop Prelude, but not by Chopin, and indeed he seems to have been fairly disappointed with that as a name for it, which I think is quite understandable because, I don't know, Raindrop Prelude makes it sound a little bit twee, maybe. And I think there's absolutely nothing of that here. I think it's possibly the jewel in the crown of the whole set in terms of intense, meaningful, moving, profound emotion. Naomi, this is for you. It'd be great to hang out again when this is all over and not be restricted to talking to each other on Zoom and via our common students. I hope you're really well. I'm very grateful to you for requesting this. I also want to put a shout out to Alan. This is very much for you as well, the Raindrop Prelude, for reasons that I won't go into, but I send all my love to you and I'll be thinking of you when I play it very much. In terms of what I can say about it that'll be interesting to you, I think one of the coolest devices he sets up here is that the same note is heard all piece. In the middle of the texture sometimes at the bottom of the texture, and it acts as this kind of tolling bell, throbbing heartbeat, whatever you like to think of it as, but it cannot really be ignored. Even though it's never the most important thing that's going on, i.e. not the loudest, it's always there. So at the beginning... play it that loud, but I wanted you to hear how that A flat underpinning the whole of the opening section makes such a big deal, makes such a big difference, and it carries on right until we transition key, and then it's replaced by a different note, but only for a tiny bit of time, and it comes back at the end of the first section, and then there's this extraordinary transition. It goes from being quite, I don't know, we can discuss what it's like, but it's definitely major and not utterly dark and despondent, and it transitions from that via this A flat into a world of real foreboding and sinister menace. It's at that point he writes sotto voce, under the voice, as if, when I teach this piece, I often think of it as being the monster under the bed, or the monster hiding in your cupboard. You can't see it yet, but you can feel it breathing, you can feel it growling, you know it's there and you know it's not going away. And that leads us to two huge eruptions. It almost feels as if the world is being torn, ruptured. I'm trying to think of a better word, but I can't. Almost feels as if the world is being hewn in two, splintered at those moments, these absolute outpourings. Which leads us then into this extraordinary kind of chorale-like section, as if asking for forgiveness. One of the really cool devices he's using here in order to tug on our heartstrings is the idea of a suspension. So this is where you set up a note that belongs in the chord and you wouldn't think is out of place. So here it's this top note. And then for the next chord you keep the same note but you change the chord, so now the note's not in the chord. So we're keeping this D sharp and we're going to go. So we suddenly got this tension. The D sharp that was once so friendly has become something that's not in place. And then on the next chord we resolve that tension and the D sharp falls down and makes something more palatable again. And so it's a really beautiful way of presenting a note as a friend and then making it something that troubles us and then resolving it. And then what he does on the next chord is another one and then resolves that. And that's why that moment is so plaintive, is so touching, is so beautiful. And then the opening material comes back and leads us to our conclusion. In terms of the opening material, I don't know what think there's something about the falling dotted rhythm that is very kind of limpid, that is very kind of supplicating. I think this whole opening section is a very, very fragile expression of something very beautiful. Maybe the day that you finally throw your soul at the feet of another person and hope that they won't trample on it, but in the knowledge that if they do, you can't stop them. It's got that amazing kind of fragile, tender beauty to it. Yeah, cool. Maybe we'll do this one on its own, and then we'll move on. deliberately didn't warn you about that bit at the end, where the repeated note goes away and we're floating on the top, because that is awesome. But it's better if it's a surprise. Okay, now we're going to do number 17. This is an extraordinary little number. I confess I didn't quite know what to make of it at first. Sort of struggling to find a good narrative in my mind, a good emotional hook. Which I've got now, but I think it's this music's definitely sufficiently, what's the word? Enigmatic. That I won't impose it upon you, I don't think, and let you see what you see what you feel while I'm playing. It's wonderfully written. There's this constant, it's in 6/8 time, which doesn't really matter what that is specifically, but it means that the fundamental beats that we're operating in are now split into 3 rather than 2. So whereas in the previous piece it was 1 and 2 and 3, and that has a very kind of solid feeling. As soon as you split a beat into 3, 1 and 2 and 3, and there's much more lilt, there's much more ebb and flow, there's much more movement. And so this piece never really loses that undulation. He sets up these boom, 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 these free-flowing quavers right at the beginning, and they're ever present, regardless of the extraordinary chord changes, key changes, harmonies, emotions that he's bringing in. On the top of that throbbing sits the melody, and the melody is almost always got full harmony support all the time. So it's got this kind of lovely cozy feeling that the melody is constantly enveloped and supported by the rest of the notes. Harmonically, the piece starts off fairly traditionally, and then after we hear the main theme 3 times, once quietly, once quite loud, and once very loud, and then he throws us curveballs in all over the place and starts wandering off into far-flung and extraordinary harmonic places. Some of the coolest moments is where the bass starts to move chromatically. Chromatic is the smallest distance you can move on a piano. And when bass lines move chromatically like here, we feel like we're negotiating some really tight, tough corners harmonically on the slalom. And there are a couple of cool moments just after that where the bass is even more emphatic in its movements. And here as well. And it's always just presaging these amazing moments of blissful radiance and beauty. We talked about sotto voce in the preceding prelude, under the voice. In that case, something quite sinister and foreboding. After this extraordinary middle section with all the key changes, he brings back the main theme for a 4th time, now marked very quiet and sotto voce, a kind of memory in the half-light, something you can't quite see or decipher, but it hangs in the air, a little halo of sound, and then it meanders to a conclusion with just the same writing as he started at the beginning. Incredible piece. Ian, I haven't really done a proper dedication to you yet. Thank you for everything you've been to me over the years. Your beautiful home has always felt like a second home to me, and you've never failed to envelop me with the sort of love that you show to everyone around you, it seems. And of course this goes to Graziella too. Thank you also for raising in your son the closest I've probably ever had to a brother. That means obviously an enormous amount to me as well. I very much hope you're enjoying these preludes. Two last ones for you now. This one is for Harry, who sent me a wonderful video of him and Jack playing it a couple of weeks ago. It was superb. If I could only make one request, is that you both redon your dragon outfits for the next video, Harry. That would, I think, give the extra final missing interpretative genius to your offering. But so seriously,
Harry's age.
Well, Harry's 6. I figured that was obvious because he plays in dragon suits. I mean, it's very cool. It's amazing hearing everything you've been doing and all your work with Jack, and incredible progress at the piano. It's really exciting, and I look forward to maybe playing with you sometime as soon as we're allowed to. That would be awesome. So I'm going to play number 20, which I think is probably the second most well-known of the set after the Raindrop. Sorry, Chopin. This is kind of a very somber, serious, funereal feel. But what makes it, I think, not a funeral march is its dynamic. It's marked fortissimo, which is pretty much the loudest dynamic we have on the piano, in music, sorry. And so it's this huge, enormous sound at the beginning. So I wonder if it's maybe the roar in one's head as one is embarking on a funeral march. This lasts for one line, and then we get much more introverted, fearful music for the second and third lines. Once much quieter, and then the last time a repeat of that music even quieter still. And we talked about chromatic bass. We've got some big time chromatic bass in the second line here. I'll play the bass very loudly. So that creates an incredibly unsettling and cool feeling for us there. The main writing is a little bit like this one, in the sense that he asks us to play a melody while having a chunky chord underneath. What's nice here for the writing is that the melody note that's here, he's asking us to play the same note with the thumb. And the thumb is a powerful digit. So that gives us the scope to really create the beef that we need. And actually in these 4-part chords at the beginning, most of the power comes from all of the notes together. It's almost as if we're always going to hear the tune, but the ability to bring out all the notes, that's what gives the power, rather than just a melody on its own and then thinking of the other notes as being somehow less important. This sinister, somber affair is going to lead us very well into the last one I'm going to play today, which is the number 22, and that's a furious, frenetic, angry prelude. The left hand setting up something that's quite regular, and the right hand constantly disrupting it rhythmically. So the left hand's always on the beat, and the right hand going bada, 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 bada all the way through. It's a very conflicting, confrontational prelude. So these are the last two. Enjoy. that ending's great after all that confrontation, the last 2 bars, everything on the beat brings us right back in check. Seems the louder I play, the more deeply the cat sleeps, which, I mean, try and make head or tail of that if you can. He looks at his most content right now, which I find bonkers. Okay, the last piece for today is a bit of Schumann / Liszt. This is for John, who again has not made it easy on me, although to be fair, he may have thought that I already knew it, so maybe it's my bad that I didn't. This is often used as a showpiece, as an encore by pianists, but I think that's not the right way to think of it because it's incredibly heartfelt, passionate, sincere, devoted music. So the reason why this has 2 composers attached to it is because it was originally a song composed by Schumann, part of his set called Myrten, myrtles, which refers to the type of flower you would use at weddings. And there's no coincidence in that he dedicated this set to his wife Clara, and in the year of their marriage. It was not a union that was an easy one, either before or during. Before, because her father did not think there was any chance in hell that she should be marrying a lowly musician, and so he was strongly against the union. During, it was very much up and down. We've talked before about Schumann's bipolar, and so his flips between mania and depression were very, very hard on his wife, probably more than anyone else. She used to write about how when he was up, it was just the best time in the world. He was unbelievable, everything she could ever have wished for in a human being. And then when he was down, it was just the most wretched of existences imaginable. This work is very much up. It's a song called Widmung, and it's a song of devotion and love for her. Liszt was such a generous soul in terms of his advocacy of other musicians, other composers' music, that he issued a litany of transcriptions from operas to songs to symphonies. We must not forget that in that time, 1850 odd, it was by no means guaranteed that this amazing music was being widely heard. And so Liszt was actually instrumental in bringing so much of it to the public sphere because he was, the performer of the time, and he would bring them as solo piano pieces, written and arranged incredibly for his audiences to open their ears to this music they hadn't heard before. So he's taken this song, and what he's done really is he's written the first verse, he's written quite faithfully. He's written the piano accompaniment, and then he stuck the vocal line on the top. Then he's decided that, it'd be quite nice to hear the same melody but in the left hand, in the bass. So then he's written his own verse for that. Then he moves into the middle section, and again he is quite faithful to Schumann. And then for the last section, when he returns us to the main material, he really lets everything fly. And it's dominated by wonderful pianistic bravura. Just quickly share with you the words, because I think they're incredibly beautiful. You, my soul, my heart, my bliss, my pain, the world in which I live, the heaven in which I float, my grave into which I cast my grief. You are rest, peace, from heaven bestowed, that your love gives me my worth. Your gaze transfigures me. You raise me lovingly above myself, my good spirit, my better self. So an incredibly, it's called Widmung, devotion. What more do you need? I would just say there's wonderful word painting in the harmony. We're in a major key. But at the 2 times in the first verse when he mentions something uncomfortable, pain and grave, he goes into this. This amazing, sudden element of bittersweetness pervades the music, which is incredibly touching. We're in A flat, and we go into the very unrelated key of E for the central section, and that mood is very different. This is the verse that starts, you are my rest, my peace. And that's what I was going to say. And immediately for the second harmony, he goes to chord 4. Chord 4 is the chord to go to if you want to release tension. So we start here, and then for rest, That's exactly what it does. So some very, very ingenious writing, and then builds to a fabulous conclusion. John, this is for you. Miss you. Feel like we haven't hung out for a long time. I have limitless, beautiful memories of us on Clan's cello course, and your enormous heart, spirit, and humanity. And I hope it's in my life again soon. Enjoy Widmung. Felt like I was playing for cat Tai Chi for some of that. I'm sure that's exactly what Schumann had in mind. Good. Well, that brings us to the end of another week. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been really fun this week. It's weird, the ups and downs of one's moods. Enjoy the reduced lockdown while we can. I'm going to enjoy our pool. Try not to kill Andy from hypothermia. But who knows, an Australian in a pool in a Battersea garden is, I think, a recipe for disaster. Perish the thought we'd strain the emergency services anymore because of that. Maybe we should be donating to the NHS just to allow for that eventuality. Which reminds me, there is a donation link on the Facebook and YouTube descriptions. Please, even if it's just a little bit, give some money to them. You can buy my DVD, the link's there as well. That will mean a huge amount to me. And I will see you next week. Yeah, I'm sure it'll roll around very quickly. I already have the program completely set. I just have to learn it. Enjoy.